wanted to give you a quick sort of backlog about me, because I think it might give you some understanding of where I come from. I'm an entrepreneur that got into events. I did pretty well in events. I ran an agency that I bought a venue, number 1 Leicester Square, the Penthouse London. I found it incredibly difficult to get the word out. I had no marketing budget. I pretty much spent all the cash I had to get the Penthouse to be a venue that was worthy of events in London. And social media started coming up, and Twitter was the biggest way to communicate with an audience at the time. I was reading a book at the time called about Gatsby and Jay Gatsby, and I realized the power of a personal brand, and I created this Twitter account called Penthouse Lord, the Lady Gaga of events. This was the whole idea. And I would wear, sort of slightly flamboyant clothes, and I would be at the front of the house, and I would always come and ask the events people what I could do to help, and I would engage in conversations with various members of the teams. Now, what that did was it allowed me to start understanding social media. I did very well in that. I ended up getting voted the most influential man in events 3 times, twice in the same year, which was quite weird. Once under Jason Scott and once under Lord Jason Scott. I built the business really well, and then eventually I sold. We made $1 million in 12 months, which was phenomenal. I won an award for that, and then I gave some money away to charity. And I sold up, I closed off, and I started again. This time I focused on YouTube. We started a beauty pageant. We traveled the world. We sold it to a magazine company called Maxim, Dennis Publishing. The videos did very well. I learned about influence marketing when it comes to YouTube.
This is going wrong.
That's okay, Mark. I'll talk so long while you're working it out. Guys, if I talk too long, just type in, we get it, you know what you're talking about, but I'm going to rush through this. So from YouTube, I went to Instagram. I didn't do very well on Instagram. I don't think I'm great at the one photo and then long text. And I found out that I was ill and I had to leave the events industry. As you guys know, it's long in hours. It's a lot of stress, the 5th most stressful job in the world only a year ago. I'm sure it'll change this year with medical staff going through the roof, let alone presidents and prime ministers. And disease specialists. But anyway, point of the story is I do this. I have to change my whole life, my whole career. I decide I'm going to go into event technology, right? I think that's the answer. I can help more people. I can still be within the events world because I love this community. And I'm going to start an event tech company. Very stressful, a huge mistake. I'm sure everyone at Social Tables can tell you that. But I started a podcast to share my story with an audience that I think I might have still from Twitter and YouTube. Long story short, the tech company fails. If ever you get a chance, YouTube venue me. It was supposed to be the LinkedIn for events and venues, and it was a massive failure. But what happened was the podcast did really well. People started engaging with me on LinkedIn, and my numbers shot up. I had like 200-300 people on LinkedIn. All of a sudden, I had over 7,000 people on LinkedIn. All of a sudden, my Twitter had about 10,000 people, and they were constantly engaging with me. And sound is going bad, says Yvonne. Okay, I'm going to talk slower on the odd chance that it's affecting the Wi-Fi. So I start this podcast. It does very well. I find out there's a huge audience. Yes, like slow motion. Oh no, Yvonne, I'm so sorry to hear that. I know Mark has frozen on my computer, unless he's sitting incredibly still. Mark, any luck on your side? Okay. NetworkTables says you can hear me perfectly. So I'm just going to continue in the hopes that it's just you, Yvonne. My apologies. So I start this podcast. I ask people what I can do to help further. In the 2nd season of the Guest List podcast, which is the show I put on, I had already won an award, which is quite strange. iTunes voted it one of the best shows. It was like a mockumentary, I guess people thought of it, but really it was just me running around, recording my conversations with event professionals, going to all the big event shows, pitching my event technology. And I ended up winning this award from Apple iTunes, best of new and noteworthy, best in business. We get this army of fans, and American Express calls and says, we'd like to put you forward as a business. This must be a business. I realize it's not a business. So I go to my audience. I say, how can I do something to keep in the events world and to keep this going? But I haven't got a product. I end up writing a book called The Eventrepreneur. It becomes a best-selling book. 55,000 copies sold. And I realized that this podcast has something magical about it. And I spent the next 2 years just studying podcasting, working with 6-figure podcasters, 7-figure podcasters. and trying to understand, where does this come from? Where does it work? Why does it work? I opened up 2 more shows in very different worlds to see if I could replicate a formula that had nothing to do with me as a personality or as an industry leader. Not another crypto show, all about crypto. I know nothing about crypto. And something called Smarter Event Planning, which is to EAs and PAs, which tells them how they don't have to work harder, but we can work smarter when booking events, meetings, and conferences. That show has 127,000 listeners, and we have 21,000 on our email subscriber list. James says, you're still good. Felly62 says, it dropped me. Oh, that's sad. Oh, she's back. Welcome back, Felly. Or he, Felly. I just assumed Felly's a lady's name. My apologies. This podcast is really well. And again, we end up adding a product to it. We add a newsletter to it where we give away special deals and offers, exclusive deals and offers called Mice Offers, because we have this audience. It was at this point, I guess, that people started calling me up and saying, could you consult for my podcast in media, in digital media? I started learning more about online marketing. I ended up starting a small company in clothes just to see if, again, if formulas work. The difference in science and religion. Religion is an idea of belief. You don't have to test it for it to work. Whereas science, you have to test and get the same results again and again and again. So that's what I am, I guess. I'm a researcher and a scientist that happens to be in the events world and happens to understand a lot about podcasting. So let me start off with reason number 1, why I think it's a great time to have a podcast, especially as it relates to your business. The average YouTube video has a 5-minute attention span. That means the average person listens for 5 or watches for 5 minutes of a YouTube. YouTube considers that a good algorithm. Anyone that's done any YouTube videos and you've looked at the analytics, you will know that is considered a success. Podcasting up to an hour. The average person listens to 80 to 90% of any given episode. The average person doesn't watch even the full 50% of a YouTube videos. So that's number 1 reason why podcasting is far better than something like a video on a YouTube channel. 2, right now, you're probably looking at me, hopefully, listening to this, but you also might have your phone on. So your eyes are all over the show. You might be working from home. Small kids could be coming in the room, trying to get your attention. Your partner could be coming in to say, "She wants some coffee with that, darling." So you're all over the show. Whereas once I'm in your ears in a set of headphones, it's just me. So it's far easier to compete for your ears than it is to compete for your eyes. There are 500 million pieces of video content on YouTube alone. There's only a very small number of podcasts, 850,000 globally, 700,000 on iTunes, and even smaller as we go into niches like events, niches like meetings and conferences. In fact, I just launched one for a prop company, a gentleman called Caleb Parker, called Workbold Podcast. We've just got him incredible numbers. In fact, we've helped him do incredibly well within the property market, and he's still linked to events with a committee called HPAA. Let me know if I'm wrong, but I believe it's the Hotel Association. And he uses his podcast as client acquisition. Second reason why you need a podcast for your business. Sometimes it's difficult to get through to someone by trying to call them, especially now people don't even like using the ring side of the phone. I don't think I call anyone anymore. And how do we get hold of them? Well, we try and email. Well, how many emails do you get? I've got, at this exact moment, I'll tell you right now, I have 7,615 emails. I'm never going to get through that. So how does it work? Well, I get an email and a phone call and a text and sometimes a DM on my social media account that says, "Hey, Jason, we'd love to get you on our podcast to talk to you about event technology. I'm on the podcast. You have me for half an hour to an hour. And guess what? I've become a fan of you. I've become a fan of your product. Not only are you selling to your listeners, but you're selling to me. And you've got my full and undivided attention because me, like everyone, likes talking about my business and myself. I'm actually not so great about talking about myself. I'm really good about talking about my business. So number 2, client acquisition. Number 1, we said already, is engagement, the ability to have long relationships, the opportunity to be known, liked, and trusted. Number 2, this idea that a client acquisition model, it's one of the best. It's far easier to get someone on your podcast than it is to get someone to listen to you pitch your product or service. Okay, does that make sense to everyone? I don't want to just be preaching out to you. So if you want to type in yes into your chat, then I can see that we're all good, and I'll go on to number 3. I think I have lost Mark due to tech. Yes, says Yvonne. Fantastic. Okay, cool. Just double checking. Yes, aye, Captain, says James Smith. Grand. We actually have a podcaster that has something called Captain Morgan or Captain's Table. So he'll love that. All good here, says Taviana. Excellent, says Sanjay. Welcome, Sanjay. I'm still here, says Felly62. Great. Okay, I'm guessing you meant here, not there. Okay, so we're talking about the second reason, which was just how you can get in front of someone, client engagement. Number 3. The reason video, I am still here, but now have a viewer. Excellent, as a viewer. When we film video, this here has been proven to be non-psychologically and orally engaging. In other words, just looking at me is not engaging. The brain will look for other stimuli. Hence, if you watch a video, you'll notice the narrator or host is constantly moving. Why? To trick the eye, to remind the brain that something is happening, to make you feel like there's something going on. Now, this is pretty easy when you have the world as your oyster and a couple of bucks in your pocket for marketing budget. You can go to great venues, you can walk around, you can interview people, you can wear different outfits, you can come in a car, a helicopter, a motorbike, you can use a drone. There's a multitude of ways to do this. We can use different camera angles. But now in quarantine, now in isolation, working from home, it's really difficult to captivate the same audience. We've seen this with all the video content that currently exists. Well, in a podcast, it's exactly the same. It's still my voice. It's still the 2 pillars of podcasting, education and entertainment. That's all I need to stay focused on. I can do it as a solo presenter and tell you my story and my successes and what I've learned and what works. I can bring in a friend and have a conversation. In fact, Mark Felstead took over season 2 of my Smarter Event Planning podcast. He did it just about Berlin. Our audience actually stayed. I thought maybe they'd drop, maybe they'd rise, but actually they stayed exactly the same. The audience loved to learn more about event venues in Berlin. And Mark is a great interviewer because that's what he does as a salesperson, as a consultant. He listens and talks and listens and talks. And we share tips, tools, and tricks. So information, entertainment. He's an entertaining gentleman. You would have heard that if this thing had worked. So a podcast allows us to not have to worry about the scenery or about the distraction or about ocular or the brain needing constant different attention. All I have to do is change my tone, my pauses, my speed, my dulcet becomes louder or hyper, and the ear will stay engaged. And I need to tell a good story. There are an actual scientific formula to do this. Again, we've learned this, we teach it. We have a masterclass. And so far, we have a very good track record. So we know it works, science. So that's, I would say, is the third reason. Also, and I want to mention this in the third reason, when you set up a home studio to film, and some of you will know this as well, it's quite expensive. You need a good camera at least. You shouldn't be doing it like this. You won't get the numbers you're looking for. You definitely won't get the engagement. You won't get the call to action, which is going to bring me to number 4. I think it's number 4. I'm calculexia, which is like dyslexia for numbers. So let me know if I'm wrong, guys. But I think all I need is a headset and a mic. I can get a mic and a headset for less than $30, Logitech 350 on Amazon or eBay, and I could sound the same as someone with a $2,000 to $20,000 studio. That is another benefit of podcasting. Moving us into number 4. There is this idea that it's all about the number, right? It's all about how many listeners you have, how many views did you get for your last video, how many people jumped on your webinar, how many people were at your virtual summit. Now, I'm not a big fan of that. In fact, if you've gone to any of my international talks, and I've talked all over the world, I talk about the power in the number, not the power of the number. I always say, what is it better, to be Adolf Hitler with millions or JC with 12 loyal ambassadors? The only way you're going to know how powerful you are is by testing your audience. So what is from call to action to action? What does that look like? Because that goes from passive to active. That goes from a listener to a fan. We look at the podcast statistics and we have a high as 63% from listening about social tables or network tables to clicking over on Google while I'm still listening, because I can do 2 tasks at once, to network tables and find out more about the product. You don't do that watching something. So I'm not going to pause and go and try and get another laptop or get my phone up to try and look it up. It just doesn't seem to happen. It also doesn't happen, and I'm an international speaker, when I speak on stage. People aren't writing down my short resources and keynotes and quotes. But when I do a podcast, I can do that. I can create a show notes page and just have some highlights. just have some deliverables, just have some quotes, just have some resources. I can mention all the ways in which to contact my guest. So I can create this valuable piece of information, but better than that, I can turn you, the passive, into the active by saying, go now to NetworkTables to find out more about our tech. And then I can actually see the stat. So I can see that 6,000 people listened and 100 people clicked over. Well, doing a webinar for 6,000 is pretty darn impressive, let alone making sure that 100 of them go over to what I need them to do. And how did that happen? Because they spent time with me, got to like, know, and trust. So, right, so that's the next big thing. Forget about the number of your audience. Think about the power of the number of your audience. And I think that's a big thing. People go, oh, I've got 10,000 listeners or 100,000 fans on Instagram. How many of those are buying your product? How many of those are buying your service? How many of those are supporting you right now in this dire time that we're currently in? Okay, so we're going to number 5. Again, please correct me if my numbers go all over the shop. I think we're still good. We're on number 5. The 5th reason to have a podcast is the ability to speak directly to your audience, to find out the exact problems that your audience is having that you can solve. Now, I know a lot of you are going to say, well, I've already got something. I have a thing that fixes this one problem. Well, then you get to niche down. And we know from the Americans that niches equals riches. Doesn't work in English, niches to riches. I don't even know what it sounds like in German. My apologies, Mark. The idea is if we can drill it down, if we're not only talking about, as Mark did in season 2 of Smarter Event Planning, the places in Berlin for events, but the best venues in Berlin for events. And then he still goes further, the best venues in Berlin for events and conferences, the best events. And he niches down. Now, when he says in his podcast, hey, reach out to me on LinkedIn and tell me if you want to hear more about venues in Berlin, or you want to hear more about hotels in Berlin, or you want to hear more about DMCs in Berlin. He gets a response, and then he works on his next episode being all about that, and he knows he already has an audience. So I'm old. When I grew up, there was this film called The Field of Dreams, and I feel like all business and marketing was based on this film. If we build it, they will come. That's what we did. We came up with products. In fact, I'm guilty of it. I did it with Venue Me. This is the product, LinkedIn for venues. I'm going to go out to the market. Well, if you speak to a Gen Y, they'll tell you that makes no sense, right? They start by asking the audience, what do you need? They get a response, go off and make it, and come back to the same audience and provide it. That is huge. Think about how much people pay for research. The entire subscription box industry is based on the idea that I get to write a little note at the end that says, I like this perfume, I didn't like this makeup, I didn't like the size of the bottle. That research, well, you get to test your product without having to do any extra work by speaking to your audience. Hi, Jason, you have to promote me to panelist, says Felly. Okay, I have no idea how to do that, but I will have a look, see if I can do that. Okay, so while I'm doing that, so here we go. I'm going Felly, I'm going more, promote to panelist. I just worked that out while talking to you. I feel like I just raised my IQ level by 1. Mark, are you jumping in? I didn't realize Mark was Felly 62. There we go. Unmute yourself. Unmute.
Hey, Jason, you're doing a great job, man.
Thank you.
So sorry, I can't get to share my screen. But you've gone through pretty much the 7 reasons.
I'm on number 5.
Number 5.
Calculates here. So I don't know if you want to jump in.
Yeah, but no, I just love the way you've been saying so far. And I tell you what, I'll give you a couple more in a second, and then we'll wrap up together. How about that?
That sounds grand.
Okay. I've got up 2. You've done it. Number 7. Here we go. Number 3, number 4, number 5.
If ever you thought you'd have a chance to watch a webinar where someone counts aloud, this is the webinar for you.
Oh, Jason, I love it. Anyway, listen, we were going to talk about, one of the things we wanted to talk about was how to make it lucrative, right? I mean, one of the other discussions we would have is to have you are the expert at having 21 ways to make a podcast lucrative, correct? How to actually earn money with a podcast. Do you want to mention a couple now, and then I'll add a couple on as well, or how it's working for me at the moment?
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, so I've a lot of people will tell you there's 3 or 4 ways. 7 is the most I've ever seen out there. We have found 21 ways to promote a podcast, in other words, get a larger audience, and we have found 22 ways to monetize a podcast. Now that can be as simple as I'm speaking, you might like the sound of my voice, you might like the information which I give, and then you reach out to me and say, hey, Jason, we'd love you to be a speaker. Well, we've just found the first way in which I can monetize a podcast. 2, we talked earlier about how you could reach out to your audience and say to your audience, like I did in season 2 of the Guest List podcast, hey guys, I don't have a product right now. I'd love to keep serving you. What is that you want to find out more about? The audience turned around and says, we actually want to learn about events. Well, guess what? I wrote a book called The Eventrepreneur. See what I did there? Entrepreneur, events, Eventrepreneur. And I sold that book 55,000 copies. So that was the second. You can create a product especially for your listener base. Now, it doesn't have to be a book. I'm a writer and a speaker, I suppose, as a creative, but you could, if you were more adaptable, you could create a software, you could create a smaller solution to your events. You could find out the registration was an issue, fix that, but you'd be fixing an individual problem that you already knew there was an audience for. We talked about that with the Field of Dreams a minute ago. The third way, of course, is advertising. It's the most obvious. I show Smarter Event Planning is a paid for by an advertiser called Assembler, which is an event tech platform. I also then charge for one of my questions. So I have another show we mentioned before called the Guest List Podcast, and I say, my favorite tech that I use is Canvas Planner. Now, Canvas Planner would pay for that mention. Unlike all other social media platforms, I don't have to say, this isn't paid for question, because podcast doesn't work like that. I own my own rights. So that's the third way in which you can monetize. Now, I'm trying to think of one that's very obvious, advertising, one that's less obvious, charge for a question, and one that's not, people don't even think about, which is sell your own skills as a chance to express it through a medium, which in this case is podcasting. So that's 3 of the ways. Of course, you can charge as well to be on the show because of the fact that you have this large listenership, this engaged listenership, this fan base that will jump over to a website, that will buy products, that will get tickets to events. So that's another way to do it. And that's number 4. I'm going to stop there because I don't give away my secret recipe to all the people.
No, you don't have to add. And I'll add a couple more, especially in these times where everybody is, not earning money or finding it very hard to spend money. I'll pick up the one there you mentioned with the Smarter Event Planning. That was where we had the audience. And I went to the event people I know in Berlin and said, hey, would you like to reach out to this audience? We can do a podcast together. We can interview you. You can highlight your venue, location, agency, whatever. And we set a fixed fee for that. And we managed to make, I managed to make quite a decent amount of money in a month doing that, which is fine. The one I'm working on at the moment, which is also quite interesting, especially for the people who are like, how do I earn any money at the moment? We're actually going to piggyback somebody else's distribution channel. And what I'm doing at the moment is now I'm going to reapproach many of those same people in Berlin and say, let's talk about now, how are you coping with this situation at the moment? And I'm being paid to do that by somebody else. So these people are going to give their opinion for 5 or 6 minutes for free, but I'm piggybacking on a distribution channel, Mash Media in the UK, who are going to then pay me to just collect that all together so that they can post on their website, because what they're saying is there is a massive need for information at the moment. Everybody is really hungry. Everybody is sitting at home wondering what to do. They want to know what's going on. They want to know how are other people dealing with this? How are other people dealing with this in different cities, different countries even? So I'm going to talk to like 10 people from the event industry in Berlin, and they're just going to give me a little vox pops of what they actually think at the moment. And that's only one episode. It's not a great amount of money, but it is a way of being able to generate money by coming up with an idea and piggybacking onto somebody else's distribution.
And it's interesting Mark says that, because we've got another podcaster, I mentioned him earlier, Caleb Parker from the Work Bold podcast, who's one of ours. He did our masterclass, he did our course, and then we now produce his show. And he's done the exact same thing. He's been now asked by another company to go out and interview a bunch of their clients. Now, why are they doing that? Because this particular company has been paid for an event that is now postponed. So really, they've got 2 options. 1, they've got to play nice to keep their client so he doesn't ask for a refund. Or 2, give them a piece of value so they feel like they're still getting their message out there. They're still getting something for what they paid for. So he's going out and he's interviewing all these vendors that had stands at this particular exhibition and giving them an opportunity to speak to his audience from his podcast. So exactly what Mark just spoke about.
And the last one, that my number 7 was your number 7, actually.
Fun.
It's fun.
It's a lot of fun.
I mean, I've done not as many as Jason for sure, but the podcasts that I've done, we've all come away feeling it's a real win-win. The people have loved being interviewed. I've loved doing the interviews. We've both learned something from each other during the interview, and we've hoped that, of course, that our audience has also learned something from it. And it's interesting that I think for my series, I interviewed like 10 people, and it's more or less a little club now. You know, any of those 10 people, like, we know we're on WhatsApp all the time, we're writing all the time. I was actually planning for us to get together now and have a lunch or a dinner together, which would have been really easy to organize from, you know, the willingness. Of course, we can't do it at the moment, but it's really formed quite a strong little society there. And that's great as well, moving forward, that those people can help me, can help Jason, or I can help them in so many different ways. And that's really sort of had a multiplying effect because of it. And like I say, I mean, I don't know what you mentioned about the budget and the technology that we've used to set up our podcast. Jason's got a great expression for me. It was, what is it again?
All the gear,
no idea. Which is slightly unfair, but yeah, I mean, I've invested something like 400 or 500 euros maximum in the technology that I use. I've got enough equipment that it looks, when I turn up to do the interviews, because you can do it over Skype, of course, especially at the moment, when I turn up to do the interviews, it looks pretty professional. People are, you know, impressed. They're, oh, this guy knows what he's doing. And yeah, we've been through a few road bumps to get to where we are with the equipment as well, but you can pick it up fairly quickly. There's not a barrier to doing it.
No, I think, and that's a great point to quickly mention, is two things. The first is, right now with quarantine, it's very difficult to still go out and do your job, right? With a podcast, you can. You just need Skype or Zoom, like we're doing right now, and a small software that then picks it up and you send it over and you've got a show. It's that simple. And you get a headset for under 50 bucks. I mentioned that on eBay, Empower, or Logitech 350H, and you're good to go. And like I said, you will sound as good as if I had a private studio, and I have got a studio just literally behind the screen. So that's the first. The second thing that we should mention as well, especially in this time, is you think about something like this. Right now, everyone is pushing webinar after webinar after webinar after webinar, virtual summit after virtual summit of it. You've got to make a certain time, you've got to stop what you're doing, you've got to disrupt your day. And especially if you are looking after family at home and working from home, you know how hard that is. Or with a podcast, it's perennial. I can get to it at some point of the day, or I can catch up tomorrow. And then what happens is people binge listen. They listen to the first one about Axica, and before I know it, I'm listening to another one about a hotel, and another one about, because I'm out for a jog, I'm allowed 1 hour a day here in London to exercise, or I'm going down to the store for my one trip a week that I'm allowed to go to, and I can catch up. And I don't feel like this now, where I have to separate a certain hour for a certain time and be engaged for a certain period of time. I can press pause on a podcast with no judgment and go to the bathroom and come back. I might even take it to the bathroom and keep listening. But that's another benefit of podcasting for your business versus all these other texts that we've been thrown at, which all again rely on our visual content, our established time period of being aware, alert, and present. It's presenteeism, which I think something was going to disappear after this pandemic passes. We're going to realize it's not that important to be present. It is important to be productive.
Yeah, great.
Does anybody have any questions? I don't want us to preach to you. Obviously, we're both evangelists when it comes to podcasting, and of course, and also lastly, a quick thing to mention: podcasting is the only social media content that is your power. It's owned by you, run by you, and you're as successful as you make it. Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, Snapchat, TikTok, Facebook all work on algorithms, of which you can only control 3 of the 7 criteria. With podcasting, you can control all of them. There is no algorithm. It is a simple step that you can click through, you can go through the steps, and there is a formula, tick, 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 and you have as much chance of being number 1 as the Rocks podcast. Whereas that's never, ever going to happen on Instagram. It is never going to happen on Twitter. It's never going to happen on TikTok or any other platform. Right? It's a real equalizer when it comes to getting your message out and getting your call to action heard and received.
Jason,
Oh,
you got
James
a
Smith has a
question,
quick
yeah.
question. Assuming the content is good, relevant, how do you scale up your audience quickly? So we have 21 ways to promote your podcast. And we do it again and again and again with all our clients. It'll surprise you what it is. It's about 2 to 3 hours worth of work every single week. And you then can check your numbers. Obviously, we ask you to host on something called Libsyn, Libsyn. It's about $5 to $10. And you get great statistics from it. And you can do a real snapshot and see what worked and what didn't. We ask you to repeat what worked and delete what didn't. And it is that simple. And we just keep hitting you with this 21 ways. And so we'll ask you to try 3, see how that works, try 3. We don't ask you to do all 21 at the same time because there's a lot of information. But that seems to be our big thing. We teach people to start, grow, promote, and monetize. That's kind of what we do. We also produce shows for people. And like Mark said, we will host you if you need us to. But that's kind of where the business sits. A good question, James. And it's not Libsyn, it's lib, as in liberated syndicate, not as in lip, as in you're a naughty boy, sin.
Should know that.
Great. So
maybe you want to mention your podcast course, Jason, while we're here.
Yeah, happily. So I run a podcast course. In fact, we start next week, Wednesday. It's twice a week. It's 1 hour. It's 12 to 1 UK time. We jump on an exclusive Facebook group, and simple as that. You then get training, and then we follow you up. We take 10 people. We budget you in 2, so there's accountability. 1 week we do a teach. The following, so let's say we teach on a Thursday, or in this case we teach on a Friday. On the Wednesday we have accountability. Make sure you've done your work, you've caught up. We do another teach on Friday. We got another bit of time to catch up. Wednesday we do another teach, and then we follow up with every single person. So every time we release 10, we have at least 9 success stories. Okay, there's 5 more minutes. I will type that in just in case anybody needs it. It will currently say we are sold out. We actually have 2 more spaces because we were sold out, and then 1 more person signed up, which then I was like, fine, I need 1 more. Then those 2 were fine, and then another person signed up this morning, so we now need 2 more people just to fill it. Actually, no, 1 more person. We need 1 more person. But if 2 of you signed up, I'd have to find another. So we do it in 2s. How have you found that, Mark, the podcast masterclass? Because you've just joined.
Yeah, great. I mean, I started with your first course at the end of last year, which gave me the basic on to do the podcasting, and now I'm working towards my next project, which will be my own channel, on the back of your course. And so you're taking me through all the steps, and I feel pretty confident that that's going to happen very soon once we finish the course.
Excellent. We've only got 2 weeks left, which is great. So this week in Mark's training, in fact, today we're teaching the 21 ways to promote, James. And next week we teach the 22 ways to monetize. And then we just get them on something called a podcast launch plan, where we basically buddy them all up, which is one of the ways to promote. And everyone supports everyone in making sure their numbers go up, which then Apple jumps in and does a free promotion. And it's kind of like if you imagine dominoes. So we teach you throughout the course how to set those dominoes up. And right at the end of the course, we help you knock them down so that it just sort of all follows into place. And great. And we've got Harry left, James, Sanjay, and Taviana. I've obviously heard from James. Thank you very much. Sanjay, any questions? Taviana, any questions? Harry, any questions? Plus, Harry, I love your surname, Cash More. It just sounds like you should always have more cash.
And I just want to throw in one of the expressions from our favorite guys at the moment. In times like this, there are 2 types of people, right? There are those who wait to see that it all goes, that it all finishes, and there are those who create. And the idea right now is to come up with new ideas. How can you generate money? And being able to podcast is definitely one of those that you can approach people with, where they still want to, forgive the pun, they still want to listen to you.
Absolutely. Like we always say, it is far less competitive for the market of ears than the market of eyes. Also, I've hit 1 million views on my YouTube channel. I made £1,088. I hit 1,000 listeners on one of my podcast channels, and I made £24,000. So it is far easier to make money through a podcast than it is through a YouTube channel, for example, let alone through your website and trying to get people to subscribe and then get on your newsletter and then offer them deals. And then that whole cycle is a very different cycle as well, which we can explain to you and talk you through. Harry says, no questions from me. It's been interesting. Thanks. It's an absolute pleasure, Harry. Sorry, Mark had the tech issues.
Sorry that I had ducked out a couple of times. Don't know what happened there. But you did a great job, Jason, as I knew you would.
Thank you.
It's your 7 steps anyway. You don't need me to.
Please. It's you've helped with everything that you've done. Taviana, any questions? Sanjay, the last 2, just to double check you guys are okay. No questions, just instructive to understand. Excellent. I'm glad to hear that, Sanjay. I think it's more than anything, Mark wanted to do this because he thinks a lot of people don't seem to understand how podcasting works, or that they've got an idea of what it should be. And I think that's why he asked me to do this, was just to give you the raw truth of what works and what doesn't work, and why it keeps working, at least for our students and our clients.
Cool.
All good? Okay. Be safe, everyone. Thanks a lot. All clear and interesting. Are you sending the recording afterwards? That would be a network table question.
That would be a NetworkTables question, yeah.
So network table, will you be sharing this recording with your audience? We're waiting for NetworkTables.
Yes.
Yes, excellent.
Yes.
Big Y, big E, small s. Can you hear the school teacher in me a bit like, that's not how you do it. Excellent. Thank you, everyone. Again, remember, your grandparents were probably asked to go to war. You're asked just to keep your ass on a couch. So stay home, stay safe, and hopefully we'll see you in the next masterclass next week.
Stay safe. Thank you, Jason. Thank you, Karine. Thanks, everybody.